Oh, good morning. Ugh. Oh, is that the sun? Yeah, that is definitely the sun trying to push through the clouds there. Yeah. Oh, yeah. Good morning, ladies, gentlemen, and others who shall remain nameless. Yeah, it's me, Dan Laurier-Beaulieu. Yeah. And, yes, I am an atheist. I arrived at atheism about 25 years ago. And the one thing that I find very entertaining about evangelicals is their question, how do you explain X? And it's usually some public school science that kids learn in the 5th grade, so when they're 10 years old. Something simple, basic, rudimentary. How do you explain that the earth is round? How do you explain that things fall when you drop them? Ooh, and they really genuinely think that we're going to be stumped by these questions. As though we've arrived at atheism without having ever sat through a basic public school science class to learn the most basic and rudimentary of things. But they never ask us, what was the most compelling evidence that led you to atheism? They never ask that. It's always some off-topic absurdity of public school science, and then they start sermonizing at me, making up all kinds of interesting fantasies about me that bear exactly zero relationship to reality. It's quite frustrating, really, when you think about it. It's quite frustrating because I keep having the same conversation over and over and over again, not just with every new evangelical, but often with the exact same evangelicals, repeating the exact same inanities. And then they complain that we don't have any new arguments. Well, that's because what we've presented is more than sufficient. I don't believe that there are any gods, because the evidence is not compelling enough to justify believing in any gods. It's simple. Why do evangelicals need to complicate it? Why? Yeah. One thing I've noticed about evangelicals is that they infantilize atheists. They treat us like we've never given it any thought, and they say things like, well, when you grow up, as though I wasn't already an adult. When you move out of your parents' home or out of your mother's basement. I never lived in my mother's basement, but yeah. Yeah. I moved out of my parents' home 40 years ago. Well, oh. Yeah, so there's that. And of course, my favorite, you just believe everything that anybody tells you. Obviously, I don't, because I don't believe that there's a God. And I keep being told that there's a God. More specifically, I keep being told that God's name is Jesus. This is something I'm continuously told, and yet I don't believe it. So obviously, I don't believe everything that I am told. Oh. But that's sort of infantilization also leads to some of their dirty tricks that they use, which, again, rely upon the assumption that I am somehow a child, that I am somebody who is easily fooled, easily bamboozled, easily led, easily misled, easily tricked, and yes, somebody who has never actually gone out into the world and thought about things. And with this, too, the assumption that we didn't really think about things before arriving at atheism. That somehow atheism is just something we latched onto because it was cool. This is very often thrown at me, that I only latched onto atheism because that's what the other cool kids were doing. No. The cool kids weren't accepting atheism. They've never been accepting atheism. The cool kids are flashing money or flashing signs of money. That's what the cool kids are doing. And yes, very often that money is associated with religion. Yeah. But the idea that we didn't give much thought to it before arriving at atheism is nonsense. I'm an ex-Christian. I really did not want to accept the idea that there were no gods. At first, I wanted Christianity to be right. And then when I accepted, very reluctantly, that no, Christianity is wrong, I still wanted there to be gods. I still really, really wanted there to be gods. It was important to me. And I tried to find some way to justify clinging to the idea that there just had to be some kind of gods. Maybe not the ones that I was raised to believe in, but there had to be some kind of God, right? There had to be. So yes, I have given a lot of thought before arriving at atheism. I struggled with the question whether or not the gods exist. And I eventually arrived at the conclusion that no, they don't. But it took me a long time. It took me a long time, and it took me a lot of thinking about it. So yeah, when you treat me like I've never really given it much thought, when you treat me like I'm a child instead of a middle-aged adult male, when you treat me like I'm gullible, when you talk down at me, you're not making any points here. Let's just say that, okay? You're not making any points. Wow. Oh, wow. So it's quite warm out today. It's plus 2 degrees, which means that all that snow is starting to melt. And that's gonna make a hell of a mess, isn't it? Yeah. And to think, last week, it was hovering around minus 20. Yeah, so, anywho. Another thing I find evangelicals do is mind reading. And their mind reading isn't all that good. They seem to get everything very, very wrong. Yeah, well. Also, the presupposition that we somehow secretly believe that there's a God, but that we're pretending to not believe for some strange reason that usually has to do with something called sin. Now, what the fuck is sin? Well, sin is anything they want it to be. Sin is whatever the person doing the preaching wants it to be. That's what it has always been, and that's what it's always going to remain. Because sin is a universal catch-all term. What it boils down to is, I don't like something about myself, so I'm going to claim that it's a characteristic of everybody else, and then insist that it's actually my God that doesn't like it. Not me, but my God. And that my God wants everybody else to stop doing this thing that I do. Yeah, that's what sin boils down to. Yeah, so that's a thing. That is definitely a thing. So, yeah, that is a thing with evangelicals. They insist that you're an atheist because you want to sin, and that you're just denying God because you want to sin. And then they turn around and they literally rattle off their own fantasies about you, the things that they actually wish they could do if they weren't so scared of their God. Now, as a case in point, there was, hopefully still is, an evangelical out there who was quite insistent that atheists were spreading diseases. And so I asked him to explain this, and he explained that atheists had given him gonorrhea, syphilis, chlamydia, and crabs. Not once, but many, many times. And I asked him, how does this work? And he finally, reluctantly admitted that he was going to Christian conferences, and while he was at these evangelical conferences, he was picking up lots and lots of gay male prostitutes and having unprotected anonymous sex with gay male prostitutes while attending evangelical fundamentalist conferences. And he basically just decided, with no knowledge, that the prostitutes he was picking up must all be atheists. And that was how he justified saying that atheists were giving him STDs. Yeah. Like, dude. Just wear a fucking condom already. Come on. Just use condoms. But in any case, that was many years ago, and the quality of these people hasn't really improved. I mean, you get the ones who insist that atheists are all on all kinds of crazy drugs, and then they slowly admit that they themselves are drug addicts. You get the ones who are insisting that atheists are incredibly violent people, and then gradually they admit that they beat their wife and they beat their kids, and they frequently get into fist fights with random strangers for no particular reason. Yeah. It's all about projecting one's own faults onto other people. And that is a problem. And evangelicals, unfortunately, rather than doing their own work and becoming better people, prefer to dump it on atheists. Yeah. Like, seriously, dude. Seriously. Anywho, another example of evangelical mind reading that I find truly fascinating is, and this thing I've noticed just in the last few years, is when they try to tell me how miserable I am, how unhappy I am, and how my life is hopeless and meaningless, and I need Jesus in order to be happy. Seriously. Wow. Talk about failed attempt at mind reading, huh? Yeah. Especially in light of core Christian doctrine. And what I'm talking about is the idea that was instilled into me as a Christian child that I was a, quote, miserable sinner who deserved death. That I was so bad that I deserved to be killed. And I deserved to be tortured and burned in hell forever. And somehow, even though I was unlovable, because I was just filthy rags, nevertheless, Jesus still found a way to love me and forgive me for being depraved. When you indoctrinate a child with that kind of self-loathing and self-hatred, you're going to create a very miserable and unhappy adult. And the thing I've noticed about evangelicals, they're not happy. They are miserable. And they are consumed with hatred. Not just of others, but of themselves. And they wallow in this self-hatred and self-loathing, just the way that I used to when I was a Christian. Self-loathing, self-hatred, self-doubt. And yet they have the audacity to tell me that I am miserable and unhappy, and that my life is hopeless. Wow. Now, of course, this doesn't mean that my life is perfect. Far from it. I have shitty days. It happens. It's a normal part of life. And everybody has them. The difference is, I don't view those shitty days as divine punishment for an internal flaw for which I need to be forgiven. And let's face it, that internal flaw, that sin, is nonsense. It is nonsense. The reality is, yeah, I'm a good person. I am a decent person, I am an ethical person, I am a compassionate person. And no, I do not deserve death. I do not deserve to be punished with eternal torture. I don't. And yes, I am happy. I am happy knowing that I am a decent human being and that I deserve to be treated with respect as a human being. I am happy that way. Whereas, yeah, when I believed that I was a miserable sinner, I was quite convinced that I would never deserve any kind of respect, and that I truly deserved only punishment. That is what evangelical Christianity does to a child. And if you can do that to a child, they will continue to carry that forward into adulthood, unless the cycle of self-loathing is broken by exposure to new ideas. That is where the evangelicals are panicking. Because, yes, now that I'm an atheist, I am a new idea, and they're afraid of that. And it's like crabs in a bucket. If one crab looks like they're about to escape from the bucket, the others will grab him and pull him back down into that bucket. The thing is, though, that I've already escaped from the bucket. Not only have I escaped from the bucket, I am swimming freely in the ocean. And they're still trapped in that bucket, and they're saying, come back here, get back in the bucket. No. Yeah, I'm not doing it. One of the things about atheism is that it does not instill self-loathing in children. It doesn't tell me that I am garbage. It doesn't tell me that I am worthless. It doesn't tell me that my life is meaningless without an outside source of validation. Whereas, well, evangelicalism does. Yeah. Evangelical Christianity teaches that without Jesus, your life is meaningless and worthless, and you are garbage. You are filthy rags. How can anybody be happy if they've been indoctrinated to believe something so horrifying? So I wanted to bring up one more little thing, and that is, well, it relates back to the evangelical practice of infantilizing atheists and treating us like children. And that is the assumption that none of us have ever heard of Jesus and none of us have ever seen a Bible. And, well, yeah, that notion is just utterly refuted by, well, basic reality, because most of us are ex-Christians who arrived at atheism by trying hard to find biblical justification for our faith as Christians. So yes, we know about Christianity because we were Christians. And we've read the Bible. It's nothing new. And no, we're not afraid of Bibles. Showing a Bible to us does not make us melt or burst into flames or run away screaming. It just is a Bible. It's just another book. You might as well show us a copy of The Lord of the Rings, or a copy of The Adventures of Tom Sawyer, or a copy of one of the Twilight novels. That's how unimportant it is to us now. Yeah, we already know about the Bible. We already know about Jesus. And yeah, we have arrived at the conclusion that it's all nonsense. We have arrived at that conclusion.